You deserved someone who would stand by you, and instead, I walked away. The shame I feel for abandoning you in your time of need is something that stays with me, and I'll never forgive myself for that. I chose to be distant when you needed someone the most, and now the guilt is suffocating. I'm ashamed of how I failed you, and that regret will forever be a part of me. Every time I remember how I wasn't there for you, I feel a deep sense of shame. I could have been your support, but instead, I turned my back on you. I was so caught up in my own world that I failed to see how much you were hurting. The guilt of ignoring you when you needed me is something I'll never be able to escape. There are no words to express how sorry I am for not being there when you needed me. The shame I feel for that decision lingers in my heart, and I regret it every day. I can't believe I ignored the signs and let you suffer in silence. The guilt I feel for not standing by your side when you needed me is something I'll carry for the rest of my life. You reached out, and I turned away. The shame of that decision is unbearable, and I'm filled with regret for letting you down when you needed me the most. I thought ignoring you would protect me from my own fears, but now I realize how much I hurt you. The shame of that selfish choice haunts me. You were looking for support, and I gave you nothing but silence. The shame I feel for not being there when you needed me is something I can't seem to shake. I wasn't there for you, and that's something I deeply regret. The guilt and shame I feel for abandoning you in your time of need weigh on me constantly. I wish I could go back and change the way I treated you when you were struggling. The shame I feel for ignoring you is something I can never undo. I let you down in your most vulnerable moment, and the guilt of that weighs heavily on my heart. I'm ashamed of myself for not stepping up when you needed me. There's a hole in my heart where my shame lives, knowing that I wasn't there when you needed me. I'll never forget how I failed you, and I'm deeply sorry. I should have been the one to help you through your pain, but instead, I turned away. The guilt and shame I feel for not being there is overwhelming. Every time I think of how I wasn't there for you, the shame fills my heart. I regret not stepping up when you needed me, and that regret follows me everywhere. I failed to see how much you were struggling, and now I'm left with nothing but shame for not being there when you needed me. You trusted me to be there for you, and I broke that trust by ignoring your pain. The guilt I feel for that is something I'll carry with me forever. I was selfish and distant when you needed someone, and now the shame of that decision is suffocating me. I wish I could go back and change everything. You deserved someone who would stand by you through thick and thin, but instead, I turned my back. The shame I feel for abandoning you in your time of need is something I'll never escape. I thought staying away would protect me, but all it did was hurt you. The shame I feel for that selfish choice lingers in my heart, and I can't believe I let you down. I ignored your cries for help, and that's something I'll never be able to forgive myself for. The shame of not being there for you when you needed me is something I'll carry with me always. You were struggling, and I turned away. The guilt I feel for not being there when you needed someone is overwhelming, and I'm ashamed of myself for letting you down. I can't believe I chose to ignore your pain when I could have been there to help. The shame I feel for that decision weighs heavily on my heart, and I'll never forgive myself. I let you down when you needed me most, and the shame I feel for that is something I can't escape. I'm deeply sorry for not being there when you needed someone to lean on. I thought distancing myself was the right thing to do, but now I see how much I hurt you by not being there. The shame I feel for that decision is something I'll never escape. I wasn't there for you when you needed someone, and that's something I deeply regret. The guilt and shame I feel for abandoning you in your time of need is something I'll carry with me forever. Every time I think of how I failed you, the shame fills my heart. I regret not being there when you needed me most, and that regret follows me everywhere. I ignored your pain because I was too focused on my own, and now I'm left with nothing but shame for not being there when you needed me. I let you down in your most vulnerable moment, and the guilt of that weighs heavily on my heart. I'm ashamed of myself for not stepping up when you needed me. You deserved better, and I gave you nothing but silence. The shame I feel for not being there when you needed me is something I can't seem to shake. I've been carrying the weight of my mistakes for far too long, knowing that I wasn't there when you needed me most. Every time I think about it, my heart sinks deeper in shame. The guilt of ignoring you when you were at your most vulnerable eats at me every day. I wish I could take it all back, but all I can do now is admit how deeply I regret my choices. I know I failed you when you reached out for support, and that failure haunts me. I'm ashamed of my actions and how blind I was to your pain. Every moment I ignored your cries for help, I was choosing my own ignorance over your need. Now that the truth has hit me, I can't help but feel the overwhelming shame of my selfishness. I realize now how much you needed me during that difficult time, and I wasn't there. The guilt of that mistake lingers in my mind, and I can't shake the regret. I've been replaying the moments when you sought my help, and every time I failed you. I'm ashamed that I turned my back when you needed someone to lean on. There's nothing worse than realizing you let someone down in their darkest moments. I did that to you, and I'm filled with shame for how I acted. I know now that my silence was the worst thing I could have given you. I ignored you when you needed me, and for that, I feel an endless shame. The pain of knowing I wasn't there for you cuts me deeper than you could imagine. I ignored the signs, ignored your needs, and now I can't forgive myself. I let my pride and ignorance get in the way of being there for you. Now I'm left with nothing but regret and shame for the way I abandoned you. You deserved so much better than what I gave you, especially when you were in need. The shame of not stepping up when you needed me most will forever weigh on my heart. I see now how badly you needed someone, and I can't believe I chose to look away. My shame is overwhelming, and I hope you can one day forgive my blind indifference. I ignored you when you were struggling, and that's something I can never erase. The regret and shame I feel for not being there when you needed me haunts me every day. Looking back, I realize how much you were going through while I selfishly turned away. I'm ashamed of myself, and the pain I caused you is something I'll never forget. The guilt of ignoring you during your time of need is something that doesn't leave me. I'm ashamed that I let you down, and I'll carry that regret with me always. You trusted me to be there, and I let you down. The shame I feel for not stepping up in your darkest hour is something I can't escape. I can't believe I ignored the signs and let you go through it all alone. I'm filled with shame for abandoning you when you needed me most. I was too focused on myself to notice how much you were hurting. That realization brings me so much shame, and I'll never forgive myself for letting you down. Every time I think of how I wasn't there for you, my heart aches. I'm ashamed of how I failed you, and I only wish I could take it all back. I thought I was doing the right thing by staying away, but I see now how much you needed me. The shame I feel for not being there is overwhelming. You reached out to me in your time of need, and I ignored you. The guilt I feel for that is unbearable, and I'm deeply ashamed of myself. I can't erase the pain I caused by ignoring you, and that fills me with shame. I see now that I let you down in a way I never should have. I should have been there. I should have seen the signs, and I should have helped. Now, all I'm left with is the shame of knowing I failed you. The guilt of ignoring you when you needed someone weighs heavily on my heart. I'm ashamed of my actions and how blind I was to your pain. I never realized how much you were struggling until it was too late. The shame I feel for not being there for you is something I can't shake. I thought I was doing the right thing by staying away, but now I see how much I hurt you by not being there. The shame I feel for my actions is unbearable. You deserved someone who would stand by you, but instead, I turned away. The shame of abandoning you when you needed me most will never leave me. I realize now that I should have done more, should have been more for you. The guilt and shame I feel for ignoring you are things I'll carry with me forever. You needed me, and I was nowhere to be found. The shame I feel for not being there when you needed me is overwhelming. I know I wasn't there for you when you needed someone, and I can't express how deeply ashamed I am of that. I failed you, and I can never make it right. The pain of knowing I ignored your cries for help haunts me every day. I'm ashamed of how I acted, and I'll never forgive myself for letting you down. I wish I could go back and change the way I acted when you needed me. The shame I feel for ignoring you is something I'll carry with me forever.